the second best hall monitor in the whole senior class, by Scott D. Pomfret. You're the last one standing. You get the tears and the cheers, the hugs and the accolades. You get to say how it all went down. The blood washes off, the bones knit, the muscles heal, ticker tape parades follow, a White House visit, sleep in the Lincoln Room? Why not? What do you want most in all the world after your ordeal? Asks the First Lady. You say, an egg sandwich and a beer. The press corps laughs. You choke on the sandwich. There's not beer enough in the world to wash it down. Your name? Kind Bud Molly, product of a father you never met, and a ruthlessly popular, fish-following latter-day hippie in sarong and tube top, whose disdain for convention, history, scientific fact, and simple mathematics was legendary. Your mother flat-out made shit up. She twisted dates. She claimed to be your older sister. She never told the truth about her age. She was always good for a laugh. You didn't take after her, with nicknames like Rain Man and Numbnuts and Screw Loose. You were voted the most likely to memorize the encyclopedia. You were the only one you knew who had actually counted to 1,000,000 out loud. You were always curious. You once dismantled your high school's PA system and put it back together again, only to find yourself with a spare piece. You were the second best hall monitor in the whole senior class. Except for the time that Lisa Gadbois hoodwinked you into accepting a forged hall pass, your record was spotless. 3 days out of junior college, you accepted the job offer that changed your life. Night security at America's First Stand, Fort Good Hope National Heritage Preserve and Fun Park, which celebrated the fiercest sustained fighting in North American history, save only Gettysburg and the Alamo. Before you started, you stayed up 7 nights straight reading about the 40 hardy European colonists, including one signer of the original Mayflower Compact, who had stoutly defended Fort Good Hope for 28 long days in 1675 against marauding Wampanoag and Narragansett warriors. Shaved head, slumped shoulders, man boobs, and baby fat. Yours was a body of circles and ovals. But in your mind, you were angular and at odds with your surroundings and just the right man for the job. You wanted to take prisoners. You wanted to defend the ideals your mother scoffed at. You marked present the giant fiberglass chicken that was a nod to Rhode Island Red Distributors, LLC, which had sponsored the park's construction in 1957. You decked out your jumpsuit with epaulets obtained from the Newport Army-Navy store. You rewarded yourself with a smart salute in the men's room mirror. Each evening, out under the full glare of the overhead lights, you surveyed America's First Stand with heartbreaking pride. You saw that it was good, and you only wished you had Lisa Gadbois or some other Eve to share your paradise. You haven't yet been released from the hospital when they first introduce you to the cameras and microphones and the bewildering questions. What's your name? How did you learn to defend yourself, Mr. Molly? What would you say to your mother if she were still alive? You know they should be asking instead, how is it that a second-rate, ill-trained former mall security officer survived the onslaught, but your heavily armed, highly motivated companion succumbed? You know the obvious follow-up is, did you hide out until the smoke cleared and then take all the credit for your partner's kills? You offer Mr. Kendall and Miss Goldilocks and the rest of the press corps the chance to unravel your tale, to pull loose its threads. You cite angles, trajectories, blood splatters, fingerprints, footprints, statistical probabilities, and powder residue. You say, I was a tourniquet tightener. I was a supply fetcher. I was the cause of death. You're enraged that, like your mother, the press refuses to order their reports as the facts dictate. You're desperate to be exposed. You've always been hungry for meaning. Numbers never lie. You weren't a complete moron. From the beginning, you recognized the shortcomings of America's first stand. Burnt-out neon, fresh graffiti, tattered costumes, a letter dangling low from the sign over the entryway, pitch-smeared picnic tables on a bed of filthy wood chips, references to so-called savages hardly softened by a half-century of political correctness. At least 3 confirmed deaths in the last decade on attractions that pushed the limits of physics and anatomy and mechanics. The grounds stank of bubble gum, cotton candy, molding hot dog buns, axle grease, waxed paper French fry trays, sawdust, and urinal cakes. The Fort Good Hope Historical Society and gift shop hawked a kaleidoscope of historically and politically incorrect postcards, snow globes, feather headdresses, pilgrim hats, cap gun muskets, Bibles, kitchen magnets, and bumper stickers. Colonial-era paintball, think muskets and paint-tipped arrows, was only a middling draw. Ever since History Incorporated, wholly owned subsidiary of the Hong Kong entertainment conglomerates Amusements Limited, had acquired America's First Stand from Rhode Island Red Distributors LLC in the Reagan era, the company's primary revenue driver had been extorting the municipality of Hooksett for tax breaks by threatening to shut down. Conscious of the park's shortcomings, you took it upon yourself to spend your shift sweeping up trash, scrubbing dumpsters and toilets, hosing down rubber mats, painting siding, mending fences, tightening screws, eradicating graffiti, and murdering several colonies of persistent rodents. You took great personal satisfaction in getting it right, and you secretly hoped that no one would notice your efforts, which rendered them more pure. "Did you see him fall?" Kendall asks. Off the record, I mean. "Fall? Get hit?" "I didn't see much," you admit. Kendall has bribed the nurses for private access. He's obviously ready, willing, and eager to conspire with you to invent a generous myth. "Isn't that what drove you to a murderous rage, Mr. Molly?" he persists. "Isn't that what gave you courage to fight back, despite all the odds stacked against you?" "I wanted to live." Yes, we all want to live, but not everyone's a hero." "It's true," you say, relieved to identify some connection to Kendall, something tenuous the two of you can agree on. Not everyone is a hero. "You're getting a new friend, Molly," your supervisor announced on his twice-monthly visit to America's First Stand. "Federal labor regulations. You're supposed to have 2 15-minute breaks on a shift, and therefore a buddy. Give you your congressionally mandated beauty rest." "I never rest." "Ha, it shows. Seriously, I don't need a buddy. I got it under control." "Threat code orange," supervisor added. "Up from yellow." "I'm not yellow." "You never know where they're going to strike. All across the country, more eyes, more ears, more assholes." Your supervisor shrugged. "The United States of America," he said, "has 59 national parks, 113 national monuments, 687 federal courthouses, almost 700 theme parks, 1,240 railroad stations, and 2,950 glass office towers, 2,952. I counted them. Oh, it's a target-rich environment. We can't possibly protect them all, but we must try." The dignity of his submission to an impossible duty overwhelmed him, and, nodding solemnly, he wiped away a tear at the unselfishness of History Inc.'s corporate parent, Amusement Limited. "Give me a break, Molly," he added quietly after a suitable interval had passed. "It's not my fault. It's a charity case. Friend of a friend of the chairman of the board." When you recover sufficiently to give untainted testimony, the feds create a big CGI map of America's first stand, complete with fun park, aquaboggan, Fort Good Hope Historical Society, and gift shop. At the agent's prompting, you narrate the attack and trace the paths of the marauders. Their visual artist renders your recitation in cartoon color. When you punctuate your story at appropriate places with relevant facts from placards describing the illustrious struggle at America's first stand, the feds shut you down. Keep it simple, they advise. You'll confuse a jury. People shouldn't be ignorant of their history, even juries, maybe especially juries, you say. Who, what, where, when, how, the agents insist. What did you see? What did you hear? But never mind why. It's a matter of national security. You close your eyes and start to count, but you don't get much higher than 5 before a lead interrogator quietly labels you a goddamn traitor to your country. Your new coworker disturbed your routines and admired your system and praised the tweaks you made to the History Inc. corporate jumpsuit. Impossibly lean, racially ambiguous, Shiva Durham was insatiably curious about every last detail of the operation. He was considerably interested in you and your silly name and your latter-day hippie mom. I never met anybody named Kindbud, Shiva said, as if the name were a personal achievement. You chafed under Shiva's attention. You had no respect for obsequiousness. Though it never came out in your considerable testimony, you quickly resolved to eliminate Shiva like any other vermin that infested America's first stand. The only thing holding you back? Shiva had a gift. It ain't no thing, he said modestly. Didn't ask for it. Didn't deserve it. Didn't even want it at most times. What is it exactly? You asked. Like seeing, he explained, only not with your eyes. The future? The probabilities. It's a way of knowing. I've never known shit, you said bitterly. I've pretended. I've guessed. I've bullshitted and memorized and imitated. But at all times I expected that I'd be found out in the end. Teach me, you demanded. You wanted that gift so badly your mouth dried up and your spit tasted of copper and your heart ached. You explained to Shiva that you were no moron. Despite appearances, you were surprisingly capable of learning and acquiring new skills. You mentioned how you were voted the most likely to memorize the encyclopedia and that you were the second best hall monitor in all the senior class. You were deserving. Just glimpses, Shiva insisted. They aren't always right, not always accurate. Or accurate, but you misinterpret what you see and only later realize it was what it was. Trunk of the elephant, know what I mean? Only later you find that there's ears and legs and a tail. Half the picture, you said with false sympathy. Half would be generous. You despised Shiva's false humility. You wanted to pick his brain, literally, with an ice pick. You wanted to pierce his skull and stand over it and inhale the sweet fumes. You wanted to take him apart, piece by piece. You wanted to count every last one of his components, no matter how numerous. In the wake of the tragic events that have led to your ongoing celebrity, Amusement Limited has placed History Inc. on the auction block. Best to get America's first stand into hands more suited than ours, the CEO says in his clipped British accent. Amusements Limited is a future-focused technology conglomerate. This hallowed ground needs an owner focused on preserving every last second of the sacred past. This is a laugh. Some seconds of the past ought to be discarded. There were no victors at Fort Good Hope. Half the colonists were wiped out, and the survivors dispersed. Weakened by infighting, the Wampanoags and Narragansetts gave up the siege and fled. They were pursued and captured by a relieving army of colonial forces from Boston. In many cases, the braves were murdered or sold into slavery, their belongings parceled among the victors, bounties paid by a grateful crown, and their heads displayed on pikes in village squares. You can buy shrunken Indian heads in the Fort Good Hope gift shop, but no placard at America's first stand has ever commemorated this inglorious end. Whenever you and Shiva encountered the day shift at the beginning or end of your rounds, Shiva was always infinitely respectful. He never tried to trick the battlefield reenactors into straying out of character or to get the teenage concessioners high. Based on this apparent sensitivity to the sacred mission of America's first stand, you resolved to trade Shiva a bit of your accumulated knowledge in return for the gift. You were giddy with the possibility of cataloging and counting the events of the future as you had of the past. It was a matter of survival for the colony of Fort Good Hope, you explained to Shiva. Their survival was not by any means assured, but for the courage of a small group of men, women, and children, things might have easily turned out different. We could as easily be speaking Algonquin now as English. They were one musket shot from annihilation, one bag of grain from surrender. Inhaling deeply on a cigarette, Shiva asked, "You know that never happened, right?" Aghast, you retreated to your numbers. You set out pertinent dates one after another, from the discovery of America to the Mayflower landing to the establishment of Providence Plantation to Fort Good Hope's construction to its celebrated siege, 1492, 1607, 1620, 1636, 1642, 1675. You pointed at the undeniable existence of the Fort Good Hope Historical Society and gift shop. Bunch of Indians were suing the government mid-century, Shiva claimed. Reparations for a land grab. Rhode Island Red Distributors, LLC? They built this place to discredit the tribe. That's all it is. A myth. You named each of the 40 colonists as if summoning them from the dead. You tried to drown him out. You wished him annihilated 1,000 times over, but Shiva looked back calmly, as if he already knew exactly what you were thinking, and forgave you just the same. You've been unable to set the record straight. Unlike numbers, you can't seem to tell the truth. History Inc.'s successor corporation invites you back and doubles your salary and puts you on the day shift. But every word you utter sounds untrue, and you speak with so little conviction the visitors want to strangle you. The visitors want the good stuff. They want you to get to the point. They don't want to hear about ancient history. When you finally get to yesterday, they eagerly interrupt. They supply witness they've learned from the internet or television. No one notices you slink away because they're so busy vying with one another to tell a louder and better story. You take refuge in a brand new trailer mounted on the same cinder blocks that supported the original you had lived in, and you remove the sign that says "Security" and place it backward against the blocks. You drape a cloth over the bathroom mirror. You make a game of counting the real bullet holes in the fort's walls, but discover, in many cases, you can't tell the difference from the fake. Rhode Island's illustrious governor doesn't realize how silly he looks standing ankle-deep in a litter of plastic reproductions of Fort Good Hope. He intones gravely, "On these grounds, America stood its ground a second time, fighting the forces of terror and evil and cowardice." You understand his invocation of terror and evil. These words make sense. But cowardice is a tougher sell. If your attacker was a coward, wasn't your fragile, made-for-television heroism even less consequential? Couldn't you have just muttered boo and sent him on his way? And Shiva's death? For nothing, if the marauders were mere cowards. Shiva would have assured you, "I didn't die in vain." He'd have added, "And even if I did, what difference?" "The gift," you would have responded. "The glimpses. They're lost." "Not so rare," he would have said. "They served their purpose. What's rare is learning to trust your instincts." Maybe he's right. When you were young, you had suspected that you, too, had a gift, but your mother always mocked your pretension. You? A gift? Gift for weirdness, maybe. You goofball. Don't know where you got it. Smacked by the weirdo stick somewhere along the way. Wasn't none of my doing. I don't even know who you are. I was the one who should have died, you mutter aloud. It's not your fault, the governor's wife whispers comfortingly. She squeezes your forearm and wrinkles her nose, comfortingly. Shiva was better than me, you say louder. He's at peace, she murmurs. I firmly believe that. He loved me, you say. She looks alarmed. Not like that, you snap. Not like a girl. I mean, he had to work at it. He didn't feel it, but Shiva acted lovingly toward me. This isn't quite what you mean. Acting sounds like play acting, which sounds fake. Shiva worked at it, you say again. It was pure, not title, not emotion, pure heart. You're desperate for the governor's wife to understand you, for anyone to understand you like Shiva had understood. Shiva had an incorrigibly good-natured cruel streak. He just didn't appreciate the way America's First Stand appealed to you. Louche and boneless, he watched idly as you tinkered and sponged and exterminated and repaired. You worked frantically, as if you might rid the world of doubt. You gonna help? You asked. Not in my job description. I don't know why you do it, compulsive motherfucker. It's called pride. Place is as useless as the arch over the Mississippi, Shiva said. America's First Stand is this country's beating heart, you repeated defiantly, citing the literature in the gift shop. Every American child who's learned history lessons from Schoolhouse Rock has dreamed of being in the shadow of America's First Stand just once in his life, and we have the good fortune of being here every single day of the year. You ought to be thankful. Why on earth does anyone visit this godforsaken place? There ain't nothing here. Why are you here? That's different. I got a job to do. Well, don't let my wife hear you. She thinks I've got a dream job. Wife? Instantly, Shiva perked up. I didn't know you were married. Tell me about your wife, kind bud. I don't know, you said, pretending to be coy and surely as you pretended to have a wife. I don't know, you said, pretending to be coy as surely as you had pretended to have a wife. We got all night, he prompted. Well, you begin. First off, she's very beautiful. He nodded and closed his eyes. He murmured, Girl so beautiful it hurt your eyes to look at her. He was always saying things like that. He called you professor because you'd been to college. Sometimes he called you mind bud. He acknowledged that you knew more about America's First Stand than anyone else in America. Maybe the world, he offered. Eager to change the subject, you said, Did you know that we have no idea what the leader of the colonists at Fort Good Hope looked like? He had a rare form of facial cancer and wore a green cloth over his face, and never once sat for a portrait. I didn't know that. Did you know that at night the colonists hoisted lanterns on long poles above the walls of Fort Good Hope, so the Native Americans, would aim high and their flaming arrows overshoot their targets? I never knew that. You suspected Shiva knew more than he was letting on. What would you have done if you had captured them alive? Asks Goldilocks. You turn and see it plain as day that this hot media babe would like nothing more than to witness a massacre. You think, this is what it must have been like to be Shiva, to see a person for exactly who she was. You shiver off your vision. Goldilocks is again a pretty young thing from the local cable outfit who would no doubt go far on the basis of looks, smarts, and enthusiasm, and maybe be a great wife to some lucky guy, not you. Shiva invented an answer to the question he so frequently asked about why any visitor would come to America's First Stand. He started curing the tourists. As the last visitors trickled toward the exit, he stole from his trailer and lay his palms on their shoulders and uttered some quiet spell. They hardly noticed his touch or prayer, but next thing you'd see, the paralyzed visitors stood and walked, or the blind opened their eyes and could see. Soon as he pulled away his hands, he glanced at you, like he'd known you'd been watching him all this while. He blinked as dispassionately as a god. You don't cure them all, you observed. Some don't need curing. Some don't deserve it. Let's hope we all don't get what we deserve, he said. How do you decide? He scratched his head in feigned ignorance. You replay the firefight. You question your conduct. Choosing the moment of your failure is as difficult as picking the precise moment when dusk turns to night. Was there some small, lesser backbone in your character that made you give way at just the right time? Was there a slight softening of the shoulders, a well-timed wispiness, so that the bullet passed and you were no longer standing in its intended arc, and it was only the straight and proud who got taken down? Did you somehow betray Shiva despite your best efforts? Did your pact with him mean naught? America's First Stand drew overwhelming national attention for its miracles and cures. Each night you swept up a litter of crutches, red-tipped walking sticks of the once blind, and discarded wheelchairs until the order came from History Inc. headquarters not to sweep them up any more. On his next visit, your supervisor gleefully noted that the gate receipts were up fourfold. You hadn't thought about counting to 1,000,000 in hours, days, maybe even weeks. But Shiva humbly denied all responsibility. I'm not healing them, he insisted. The gift lets me see which one will become healed, and I lay on hands just in time so they attribute it to me. Can I be healed? You couldn't keep from asking. What ails you? He asked softly. You had secrets and urges Shiva couldn't dream of. I don't know what ails me, you snapped. Isn't it you that's supposed to have the gift? New legends have arisen, new scenes to reenact. Your role is henceforth to be played by a handsome college kid in need of a few bucks, an aspiring professional actor who hates this role and would rather play a teenage vampire. Shiva's role has been created by a once famous child actor seeking a Hollywood second chance. The remaining roles are parsed out to former reenactors, now wrapped in turbans and white robes and braided belts, all available for sale in the Fort Good Hope Historical Society and gift shop. You are paid to make the occasional cameo, travel costs included. You pose for photos in the burned-out wreck of your trailer, which, pre-pocked with bullet holes and scorch marks that looked more real than the real thing, makes the rounds to minor national treasure and heritage states across the nation. You didn't invent the standard story of your survival. You never claimed to be a hero. Nonetheless, you are guilty. You have not declined the spotlight. Just before the attackers came, you and Shiva got goofy together. Riding around the grounds, you pulled wheelies in the discarded chairs. You hoisted a giant game of pick-up sticks with all the crutches. You swore even the fiberglass chicken enjoyed these antics, which were on its grand scale. You granted Shiva special permission to let things lie, a scuff mark not rubbed out, a cigarette butt left where it fell. You felt sorry for him because, while he had an armory in his trailer, there was no sign saying security over his door, so you invited him to bunk at your place and bask in your reflected glory. You persuaded him to get off his ass and help slap a sap-yellow coat of paint on Fort Good Hope, which was meant to convey the impression of split pine logs. You noted the paint's butyrachous quality. You had been building your vocabulary because you had a strange sense that there would soon be an occasion when it needed to be deployed. Booty-racious? Shiva asked. Booty-racious, you repeated, as primly as a spelling bee champ, having the nature of butter. Booty-racious. He examined the paint from several angles. "You got it, champ," he concluded. "It is booty-racious. It's the most booty-racious thing I have ever seen." He said it like it was a serious accomplishment. He said it like the two of you had something to be proud of. He said it like you were two friends in on a big wackadoodle secret that was going to change the world. You blinked twice. You didn't want to say the wrong thing and then have him say the wrong thing and then the whole situation swirl out of control. Shyly, you daubed him with your paintbrush. He threatened to daub you back. "Don't spoil my uniform," you cried, dancing away. Then you laughed, because no one was going to see your uniform but him. You tied a tourniquet above the elbow and coldly hack off the hand that ails you. 5 severed fingers wave back at you from an impossible remove until a stray dog snatches up the severed hand and runs off with it. You later find it chewed to shit, and when you poke it with a sharp stick, it wakes you and you are angry and healed and indisputably alive. Truth is, you and Shiva never really made a formal pact. After the fact, when it's too late, you discover a pact implicit in your interactions, and you hang yourself for it. You have a sense of rupture, but no consolation. You are a moron. You are deformed. You are a shrunken head on a pike. You want to hide your face forever behind a green cloth. Whether the product of Shiva's gift or your own growing powers of observation, you sensed darkness gathering. You heard the rumbles about blasphemy from the mullahs and evangelicals. You imagined something on the grounds just out of sight and earshot, something small and wizened and fearful, which at the same time presented a menace. You sat Shiva in the center seat of the 3rd row of the shabby Fort Good Hope Historical Society and Gift Shop lecture hall. You mounted the stage. You yanked at your uniform. You flicked the microphone, which was not plugged in. Shiva clapped uproariously. He clapped until you signaled for silence and warned that the obstreperous would be removed from the auditorium. Obediently, he settled in for a good listen. Afterward, you collected butts from the floor at his feet. He said, "You're not a moron, kind bud." He said, "You don't have to be afraid." He began to count. 1, 2, 3. You laid a finger to his lip, which stopped moving. With wonder in your tone, you said, "You said it. You said the right thing." Your gazes locked and held, and then you looked away. You shared half your daily egg sandwich. You shared your beer. You asked, "Don't you sometimes feel like you won't rest easy until you've plucked every last wing off every last moth flickering around in those overhead lights?" "I've never felt like that, kind bud," Shiva said, but he didn't look at you like you were a complete moron. You thought it would be funny to play a trick. You laid in wait for him outside his trailer and ambushed him when he came out, firing 3 quick paintball blasts at his bare chest. Shiva struck harder and faster than you thought possible. You spat out a tooth, and the hinge in your jaw worked less true. You asked, "Did you know the first night of the siege of Fort Good Hope took place under a full eclipse of the moon?" The Wampanoags regarded it as a favorable sign for an ambush. You never doubt you can memorize anything you set your mind to, but you don't have language to describe your feelings for Shiva. Not love, clearly. That's not the right word, or else you wouldn't have failed him. There aren't numbers high enough to temper your grief. If the attackers hadn't existed, you would have to have invented them. An end to your satisfaction was required. No, not satisfaction. That was not an apt word. That was like cowardice. Call it instead what it was. Your happiness. A sniper picked off the parking lot's lights one by one. They planted their bombs at the entrance gate of America's first stand and overran the perimeter. Pockmarks blossomed. Wood split. Plastic scorched. They seemed to know exactly where you were hiding. Shiva formulated a plan to fight back. He executed. You didn't not execute. You just didn't fully execute. Also, you counted aloud. "Shut the fuck up," Shiva said. "They'll hear you." You counted louder. You were afraid to meet his eye. You avoided looking at his terrible wound because it had grown lips and mouthed silent, bloody accusations. You were overwhelmed by feelings too numerous for counting. You were a big, fiberglass chicken. Shiva uttered a grocery list of small arms and ammunition. He seemed to know exactly what he needed, as if he had done all this before. You did as you were told. Perhaps you brought back the wrong thing. Shiva never scolded you. Using your supplies, he efficiently eliminated the enemy, even as life drained from his body. He seemed to be able to see in the dark. Before it was too late, you wanted to ask, "Were you sent here with your gift to protect me? Were you always faking it? Has this been a setup? Were there never labor laws that required coming here?" You should have verified the applicable regulations, which would have been easy to do, but your loneliness prompted you to participate in your own deception. When Shiva finally died, the blood flew from his neck like a startled bird. Next time you return to America's first stand, you notice the fort has taken on a harder and firmer aspect than you remembered, as if it was already preparing to receive a different type of visitor. The violence has scared away most of those seeking to heal. Now the tourists come to feel. It's become a gawking place. Better when it was the place of gum chewing and daydreams and bored sighs. Prepare a new truth. Fort Good Hope has fallen 400 years after the fact. The attackers who were not killed by Shiva have been hunted down. Some shot themselves before capture. Some tell the truth about what happened. No one believes their tales. To the victors, the spoils. Give yourself a hall pass. Give yourself a break. Shiva would want you to own this story. Shiva would want to punch you again in the mouth and daub you with yellow paint. You touch the hole where the tooth was lost. Your jaw aches. Obligingly, you shoulder the banner. You know it's better than hundreds of other banners you could wave, but you can't quite remember why. Only your heavy-lidded former supervisor is ripe with skepticism, but even he knows enough about this game to bite his tongue and bide the next promotion up the corporate ladder to the C-suite of Amusement Limited, where the future lies. Scott D. Pomfret is author of The Second Half, a gay American football story, The Hunger Man, and Only Say the Word, and a collection of short stories, You Are the One. Past published works include Since My Confession, a gay Catholic memoir, the Romantics brand gay romance novels, and Q Guide to Wine and Cocktails, and dozens of short stories published in, among other venues, Post Road, New Orleans Review, Fiction International, and 14 Hills. Scott is lucky to be able to write from his tiny Boston apartment and even tinier Provincetown beach shack, which he shares with his partner of 15 years, Scott Whittier. For more information, see www.scottpomfret.com.